biggest challenge at the moment is that the economy's patchy. Spending in December fell 0.5% on where it was a year ago. Spending on Boxing Day was down 12% year on year. I'm still worried about the jobs market. I'm worried about the fact that job ads are still 30% or so below pre-pandemic levels. Number of applications per job are 3.5 times higher than pre-pandemic. Electricity prices are up 12% over the last year. Gas is up 16%. Those are the highest increases since the late 1980s.
There's quite a bit of coverage that this year interest rates may go back up, and I think, myself included, I kind of thought we'll keep coming down and we'll just have regression to the mean of the long-term track of the official cash rate, and surely they'll just keep going. But it sounds like, no, that's not what's going to happen. We're actually going to see interest rates coming back up. Today we're going to find out what is really going on in the economy out there as we enter early stages of 2026. We've got Brad Olsen from Infometrics, the CEO and Principal Economist. Thanks for joining us, mate.
Thanks for having me in.
Yeah, I'd say most people will probably recognise you. You're here, there and bloody everywhere.
It does seem like I live on a plane more than I live at my own house. So yes, we get about, but important to see the economy in action rather than just look at the spreadsheets.
Do you enjoy getting around different parts of the country and sort of talking to different people to get a sense of what may be happening in one region compared to the others?
It's fascinating, and because it's so different, like you can go to anywhere from, Ashburton to Invercargill to Tekapo to, hometown of Whangarei. And yes, there are similar drivers of what's happening in the economy, but they are all different. It will depend on, what the weather's been doing recently, how some of those big anchor employers are doing. So yeah, getting there does give us a lot more intel. Now, you still got to rely on the data. I don't want to go on sort of just anec vibes too much, but, it's good to sort of add a little bit more flavour and colour to what we're seeing in the numbers.
Well, before we get into what you are seeing, how does one end up being so far down the economics rabbit hole that you're probably the youngest with the biggest profile, surely, by a mile?
Well, being willing to talk about it and being interested in it, helps. And certainly from my point of view, the whole reason I got into economics was because that's the way that the world works in my mind. It's how you make the connections. It's what motivates people to do the stuff they do. Often we talk about businesses and the economy like it's sort of this random esoteric sort of cloud out there. It's people. It's people making decisions every day about their own circumstances, the businesses they're leading, the governments that they're part of. So it was just a way for me to try and explain what was happening. And as someone who clearly likes, to have a view on stuff, I wanted to work for an institution that could, talk pretty prominently about it. I moved to Wellington because that's where politics was, not the politics in terms of government, but that's where government departments were. They made the decisions, they sort of, put the options on the table. And now being able to work for an institution that isn't in that decision-making role, don't work for a government agency that has the final call, but we can have a lot of, I would like to think, influence on those important conversations day to day. So a lot of it was just being open to putting your neck out there and saying and calling stuff how it is, and I think we've done pretty well with that.
Did you do economics all through school, and what sort of...
Totally, yeah. I was a bit of a nerd from that point of view. I mean, I was writing down the stock numbers from the TV news when I was like, year 7 or so at intermediate. So I was clearly a nerd from way back. Did more of the economics in that through, I think, year 9 at high school, when it sort of split off into its own subject and sort of continued that through. Got an economics scholarship, which was really cool, through Callagher Economics Foundation. And sort of that led me down the path at university, and I've sort of kept going. But to be clear, I didn't think I'd be in this position, for probably a couple of decades. So it's both been an incredible roller coaster, but you sort of have to figure out how to build the plane as you fly it as well.
Yeah, good on you. You must get a bit of blowback when you do get around the country from different age groups.
Yeah.
People that don't like your opinions or your calls.
Strangely, online a lot more. People in person are really nice. I don't think I've really encountered anyone that's been like nasty or anything in person. People have had disagreements, and I actually embrace those. I think we should have a contest of ideas. Like, no one's got a monopoly on wisdom. Certainly not economists. We make 10 predictions, and 7 of them come right, and the other 15 of them don't. But it's useful to sort of hear that feedback. The stuff online is tough. I mean, geez, you must see it in the comments as well sometimes, good and bad. The thing that I always find interesting, people say not to read the comments. I actually think it's sort of important to. You just can't take them to heart, because I do want to know what people who have a different view are thinking. I just worry, right, that I'd very much like to have a contest of ideas. Come at me in terms of the discussion points, your different views, but calling me names or similar isn't really a great way to engage.
No, it's real low level IQ stuff. On the comments, what's interesting, because I think you've recently been on Q&A, which have got a pretty big profile, and the YouTube comments, I was skimming through those, and You're sort of in your conversation probably leaning towards more being a bit skeptical about how the economy is going, which we'll get into very soon. But actually, a lot of people are agreeing with you in there. But just the tone of those comments of how cooked the economy is, how effed the country is, everything, and it is a like a dangerous place, I think, to get in there and yeah, and the number of likes and stuff that they had. And it's almost like, I mean, we made some content recently too about how we're starting to see some SMEs do a bit better, and then things to be planning for this year. And it's like you're assuming growth, there'll be no growth. It's all going to be negative. And I think sometimes people, they use economic data to self-fulfill how they want something to play out.
Yeah, I mean, that whole sort of self-fulfilling prophecy is totally an issue, both on the up and the down a little bit. Like, I'd never want to come out to you and say, you know what, the economy is just going to go hell for leather no matter what. It's
Mm.
going to be amazing and damn the rest of the numbers. Equally, it's not useful, right, to say the economy is so completely poked that it's never going to regain any momentum and things are never going to get better in life. If you're sitting out there as a household, you're going either things are like overly rosy, which just everyone's skeptical about, or they're so downbeat that, well, why would I even come out of my shell? You become sort of like Eeyore and Winnie the Pooh.
Mm.
So the challenge we're trying to, I guess, bridge at the moment is that we don't want businesses and households to sort of think that things are magically going to improve just with a click of a fingers. But equally, if you're going to have to come in or sort of navigate still choppy waters or sort of a lack of conviction, as we've put it, in terms of economic momentum, there's ways you can plan around that a bit more so that you can protect yourself without having to go completely into your shell. Yes, economics is the dismal science, so we're always a bit skeptical. But I think it was more, we're just trying to provide a little bit of that context because we do worry that, some quarters seem to be very, very hot on the idea that the economy is magically turning around this year. I hope that's the case, but I
Mm.
think we've just got to be a little bit cautious about that.
Well, what are you seeing that is giving you that cautious lens on that chat?
I mean, I think the biggest challenge at the moment is that the economy's patchy. You look at a lot of the indicators recently, and yes, there's been some better ones, but I don't know if there's many indicators that I could look at and go, you know what, there's a sustained level of momentum. It's just continuing to move up time and time and time again. You look at the likes of consumer spending, which is a pretty good indicator of how households are going. The likes of spending in December fell 0.5% on where it was a year ago. Spending on Boxing Day was down 12% year on year. Yes, households might have more money, but they're clearly a bit cautious. Even, you look at the likes of the labour market, unemployment rate went up. I don't actually have as much of an issue with that particular headline number because you're dragging more people into the labour force. They're all of a sudden looking for work. Some people are getting it, not quite as many. But even the types of jobs that are on offer, 55% of the jobs growth in the December quarter were part-time roles rather than full-time. That says that businesses are still a bit shy about hiring as well. So there's just a number of those data points over time. The number of job ads in December fell back a touch. The number of building consents being issued, although continuing to grow, the underlying trend is starting to move a little bit more sideways. We just look at all of that and go, oh, we're just not convinced. Because let's be clear, what did we say at the start of 2025? We all said, it's going to get better this year, and it didn't necessarily. So we're just a little bit shy of sort of calling it too early, and we're just being a little bit more cautious about how quick that tune-up is.
Too many of us signed up to a KiwiSaver plan without much thought. And signing up is great, but if you've never got advice before, you could be missing out. Your KiwiSaver account could become one of your biggest assets over your lifetime. That's why getting expert advice early and ensuring you're in the right fund is so worthwhile. Generate have a team of KiwiSaver advisors available to help. Head to generatekiwisaver.co.nz/change to book a no obligation meeting. They can even come to you. A copy of the product disclosure statement is available at generatekiwisaver.co.nz. The issuer of the scheme is Generate Investment Management Limited, and of course, past performance does not guarantee future returns.
Do you think that some households are probably just, almost fatigued of waiting for it to get better and therefore are, struggling to see that A, things can, or B, that maybe they're more in control of some solutions and they're just so tired of that they can't get themselves to that start line for themselves?
I think that's a big part of it. And there's a challenge around what the circuit breaker is, because if you're a household, you've been sitting there the last couple of years. Yes, recently you've got a lower mortgage rate. If you've got a mortgage, only a third of households do. So there's a lot that aren't going to be directly influenced by that mechanism. Savings rates will. But you're sitting there, you've got a low mortgage rate, but you're going, it's still pretty hard to pay a mortgage if I don't have a job. And so I'm
Mm.
still worried about the jobs market. I'm worried about the fact that job ads are still 30% or so below pre-pandemic levels. The number of applications per job are 3.5 times higher than pre-pandemic. So you're fighting with a lot of people for roles. In that case, you're sitting there as a household and going, I'm worried about the jobs market. I'm not going to spend quite as strongly until I see more jobs coming on board, because then I feel like I've got more opportunity. From a business perspective, you're sitting there and going, well, until I see better sales, there's no need for me to hire any more people because I don't want to overcapitalize myself. So therefore, you sort of have this vicious circle of you need to see jobs to see more spending, but to see more spending, you need to see more jobs. What gives first? And so for households, I think they are just a bit naturally cautious that after the last couple of years, everyone's had to spend a lot to just sort of, tread water. You've got a little bit more inflation pressure. You haven't got as many jobs. I think people have just been a bit burnt in the last couple of years.
For those who maybe don't love reading about economics or understanding some of these things, one of the questions I often see is, why do we want more people to lose jobs? Which basically means, why do we want unemployment to go up? Because it was at historical lows for a bit there, right? So could you talk to where maybe the current unemployment sits in history, and then why we do want a healthy, let's say, level of unemployment?
Well, and this is, I think, look, a real issue around economists is that we're sometimes a bit ham-fisted in how we talk about stuff. I don't actually know genuinely any economist that's like, yay, the unemployment rate's gone up. That's awful. People have lost jobs. It's livelihoods. It's how they pay for stuff. The way that we talk about it, though, is more around how the labour market has slack or not at different times and what that then adds into the economy. So it's not genuinely that people want fewer jobs or people to lose jobs. It's more that that's the byproduct of all the other changes in the economy. It's the way that you notice it. It's the symptom rather than the actual cause.
Yeah.
And so when we look at the economy, there's always a sort of natural, what we call the natural level of unemployment that comes through, because people are either always moving jobs at different points, and so whatever point in time they don't have that role, they're between training and the next job, whatever else it might be, they've just become a parent for the first time, they've done some parenting, now they're looking to come back into the workforce, they'll technically be unemployed at that point. So there is generally a natural level of unemployment that flows through. Some of it's structural, some of it's frictional. There's a whole bunch of terms that we use, but there's elements of that. What we then have is this fun term that you can't actually figure out the exact number for, but you can try and estimate the NARU, the natural, basically the natural non-accelerating rate of inflation, of unemployment with regard to inflation. What that means is that when you have the unemployment rate that is so low, and that's what we saw during the likes of a couple of years back when the unemployment rate was below 4%, there's so little talent available in the market and so much work to be done that everyone is having to pay over the odds to get work done. And people start to offer what I call sometimes the bugger off price. Because, you'll be sitting there, you need a builder, but so do the other 40 people out the door. And it's like, who's going to pay the most to get that one builder? Because there's only one builder available. You're like, I'll pay you $40 an hour. I'll say I'll pay 50. The guy outside says I'll pay you 60. So prices get bid up when there's sort of not enough labour supply relative to the amount of work being done. To try and bring that back into alignment, you start to see the Reserve Bank, in this case, that'll lift interest rates to stop us spending quite as much money. So all of a sudden you say, I can't afford a builder. I've got no building work to be done. So therefore, it's only between me and the guy outside who now need to get that one builder's attention. And so over time, you sort of see less of as much demand. If you're a business and you're going, well, previously I had this much work to do and I had this many workers to do it. Now I've got this much work to do, but I've still got this many workers. I probably don't need that workforce, so I need to trim my workforce to more level out what activity is coming through. That's where the unemployment increase comes from. I'm not saying it's a good thing. It's the byproduct of trying to get the economy back in alignment.
What is it suggested that maybe it should sort of sit around? Is there a ballpark?
4% seems to be like the low point, sort of what we might term a sustainable low. And to get below that, which genuinely I'd hope to get to, you need to be training people in a different way so that when you sort of do find those skill shortages, water technicians, nurses, instead of going, oh gosh, I need it today and it's going to take me 3 years to train a nurse, you sort of have that talent pipeline that you're building over time. So we need to be thinking a lot more about education. But 4% is normally like the natural low rate. At the moment, right, we're at 5.4. So clearly there's a bit of slack in the labour market at the moment. So that's why people aren't getting as good at pay rises, because as a business, at the moment, businesses out there are saying, well, I don't need a whole lot more talent. Therefore, if you're asking me for a pay rise, I might and look at it. But if it's too big of a pay rise, I might go, well, actually, I'll find someone else who'll do the work for not quite as much. So because there's more availability in the market, if there was a low unemployment rate, then as a business, you go, I can't really afford that higher price, but I need to get the work done. So I sort of have to pay whatever is going to get that talent.
Well, that's such a change from where we were, right? Because to illustrate, I guess, the other side of that, I was talking to a business owner and they were growing quite quickly through the frothy economy. And every time they would go to hire, the recruiter would say, oh, hey, heads up, since 4 months ago, that level is now paid at this rate. Now, that business had an open sort of page policy on what people get paid. So not only to get that growth, they would have to then pay the new rate and then lift everybody's wages as well. So it seems so long ago.
Yep.
But this is, I guess, those economic cycles that we go through, right?
Well, and I think also the last couple of years, we've sort of compressed the economic cycle. We went from big highs to big lows to big highs to big lows. Like it's been a little bit all over the place. When the pandemic hit, we, overstimulated the economy because it needed a bit of a jump start. Then we kept that stimulus in for effectively too long, which then generated more inflation. There was lots of work to be done, not nearly enough people to do it. Unemployment rate got really low. Pricing pressures came through. You couldn't actually find talent, right? You talk to builders and I use that as an example, but you couldn't find a builder for like 6 to 9 months. So stuff wasn't getting done. Interest rates then lifted over time. People didn't spend as much. All of a sudden, the unemployment rate, went up. Economic activity came down. We then got to the point, sort of the last couple of years, where it got too weak, and then we've tried to then stimulate it by cutting interest rates. Now we've got to a place where we've cut interest rates so much that we are generating more inflation than effectively we'd like, and now we might have to lift them back up. Like we've sort of gone from the extremes a couple of times the last couple of years. We've just been whipsawing everywhere.
There's quite a bit of coverage that this year interest rates may go back up. And I think, myself included, I kind of thought we'll keep coming down and we'll just have regression to the mean of the long-term track of the official cash rate. And surely they'll just keep going. But it sounds like, no, that's not what's going to happen. We're actually going to see interest rates coming back up. A, do you have your thoughts on that? But B, could that risk, just as we may be getting some confidence that things are getting better, that people were going, oh, I just going to have to wait for this purchase because I'm not sure if we're going to end up paying more on our debt.
You're bang on that last point. There is a risk that, again, more the perception of interest rates starting to go up starts to sort of kneecap or curb a little bit of that enthusiasm in the economy. But the Reserve Bank potentially has little choice either, because the story, right, was that inflation should come down when there's more slack in the economy. Businesses can't pass on price rises as much. Because if you're a business and you start to put your prices up in a weak economy, people are going to buy less from you. So therefore, you're going to lose sales and go out of business. So that should limit prices. But inflation's now been going up because businesses have gone, you know what, I've got to do it anyway. And so I think for households this year, they will be looking at those interest rates. Already your retail mortgage rates at the longer end, sort of your 3, 4, 5-year rates have started to lift. Your 6-month rates, your real short term, have cut, but that's only because, they'll cut and then probably in 6 months' time they might be higher. At Infometrics, we're probably thinking at the moment there's an interest rate increase to the official cash rate at least towards the end of 2026, but it could be as early as May if you saw all of the data between now and then remain hot. And I guess that's sort of the real compromise at the moment is that you've got inflation already at 3.1% outside the target band. Of course, a lot of households are facing even more intense pressure on the essentials like their energy bills and food and similar. The Reserve Bank's also then looking at the economy and going, well, the idea that a weaker economy would limit price increases hasn't really been working out as well as we expected. And there was 75 basis points, 0.75% cut off the official cash rate last year. That's going to start to take effect at some point in 2026. So you could find yourself mid this year, the economy warming up a touch, but interest rates are also starting to rise, but also the likes of inflation remaining higher. It's a very sort of complex and volatile, or potentially volatile cocktail.
Yeah, have we sort of been here before where we've got this we've got this tool, the official cash rate, to sort out inflation, but it's not really happening. And this is all getting a little bit murky now as to does this thing even, is it as effective as it maybe it once was? Or
I think it is still very effective, to be fair. The time taken still takes a while. Like monetary policy is oftentimes quicker than fiscal policy, but it's still not immediate. Like, no one goes and refixes their mortgage or takes a new term deposit out 3 seconds after the OCR changes. So there's still a natural lag there. I think the challenge is we've been a little bit, it's been hard to forecast ahead what's going to happen. And so we have had to overcompensate on so many different ways. And so I think for a lot of households out there, they are going, well, what is the Reserve Bank going to do next? Because it does have a big implication for me. Even the Reserve Bank's been pretty, inconsistent over time in their forecast. Now, it's a flipping tough role. I don't envy their decisions and how tough it is, but it has massive implications for household wealth and everything else.
In under a minute, can you give us an education lesson on the difference between monetary policy and fiscal policy? Because we probably hear that in the media all the time. You would be very familiar with it, but a lot of people would probably have no idea the two things.
Yeah, so the fiscal policy is what government does. Big G, what they spend on. What the Minister of Finance comes out effectively at the budget every year and says, here's where we're putting the money this year that we collect from taxes. We've got a bunch of money that we're going to take off you. We're going to spend it on these areas: health, defence, superannuation, whatever else it might be. And at the same time, of course, how much they tax you, because they've got to collect that money from somewhere. Now, the fiscal policy stuff often it takes a bit more time because it takes a while for laws to be passed in Parliament, but you can be often more surgical. As a government, you can say, well, I'll put a pot of money here or a pot of money there, or I'll make sure that you don't get money or get more if you need it. So you can be sort of fairly strategic with it. The likes of monetary policy set by the Reserve Bank dictates where interest rates are. Now, all else being equal, if interest rates go up from where they were, it's more expensive to borrow, which means that fewer people will want to borrow and spend because they need that money. And it's also more reasonable to save. So more money gets locked up in bank accounts, more money goes on mortgage repayments, less out into the real economy. At the same time, interest rates go down, you've all of a sudden got more money that can be spent because borrowing happens and it's not worthwhile to save your money. The difficulty there is that you don't get a different interest rate depending on what person you are in society. You get sort of whatever the mortgage rate is from your bank. So monetary policy is a much more blunt tool, but often faster. Fiscal policy, government spending, is often a lot more targeted, but takes longer to get going.
Do you think that maybe we've underestimated the impact of the aging population in terms of the amount of money that was sitting in, say, term deposits, and then we're going to incentivize them not to spend, and we're going to say, right, we're going to give you up to 6%, and the flood of money that ended up over there, and these people at this stage of their life are probably going to be risk off, and they're not, big investors, and so maybe we, impacted the people who have got the levels of debt and really gave them a fright too, who were then rushing to buy a house because they were going up and going up quickly. Then they've had to face rising interest costs, and then you've got the people at the other end that are going, wow, we're getting 6% again to save our money. This is an absolute no-brainer to help top up the pension or add to some income into the household when we've got risk-free, guaranteed after-tax, probably 4% plus returns.
Oh, hugely. And I mean, look, as an economist in New Zealand, you need to know about sort of two topics all the time: the housing market and interest rates. Last year, you also needed to learn about butter because of butter prices. But the number of people that stopped me in the street to either ask about their mortgage rate, but also recently their term deposit rate, where do we get a better return, is fascinating. And look, my grandmother asks me this all the time. She's like, Brad, what's happened to term deposit rates? I'm not making any money. Where do I put my money? It's like, well, in a riskier asset class, but like you've got to be willing to take that risk. And when, some people are using this money sort of day to day, they don't want it to be locked up quite as much in that risky stuff. So it has changed the dynamic. There is a huge amount of money there. Let's be clear, that becomes even bigger over time. There is a growing amount of New Zealanders who are aging into that retirement bracket. And as that comes through, there's not only a wealth of cash that has to be, find a home in terms of what returns it's trying to make, but at some point that's a huge amount of wealth that has to get transferred to a different generation too. Now that's good if you've got people that have got money that are going to pass it down to you, but it also means that the wealth divide could get even worse in the future, because if you don't have anything to pass on to your kids at the moment, that wealth divide's only going to grow.
Most Kiwi don't have a financial plan, they have a she'll be right mate attitude. Amy from Leverage is helping KTC listeners change that. If you're needing direction, clarity, or wondering what your next financial move should be, then book a call with Amy or download her free DIY financial plan to freedom. To do that, visit financialplan.co.nz.
Yeah, something I've been trying to teach people about via Keep the Change is that maybe we have to understand that we've got to do services or help people that do have the wealth, and if we have an aging demographic, then naturally that probably is that demographic. And two examples of clients that are doing it, but I'm saying we can do it at a micro scale as well, i.e. mowing someone's lawns who doesn't want to do it anymore, right? But literally today, I had a client telling me about a very large project that will be happening in that demographic, and it's after they come back from travel. So, a very different version of the economy for that person, right? And maybe they're going, right, interest rates are coming down, so we'll take the money from the term deposit, we'll go do some travel, and then we come back, we're going to spend some money on our property. And so now they've got a good pipeline of work to keep them busy for a good sort of, it'll probably take them 2 months to get through it and do it really well. So that gives them confidence. And then the other client, same sort of thing, goes to a home show, and all of the conversations were, well, we might as well just get on with it. We've been planning to do this at the house, so we might as well do it. And I wonder if hopefully we're going to see a little bit of a flood of that money where instead of, okay, we're going to save it for the 6%, it is let's get on with it and do the repair at the house, do the enhancement to the house, or whatever it is that they may want to spend that money on.
I think you're totally right. I think you're also seeing that in terms of almost early inheritances and that coming through as well, in terms of people who are giving their kids or grandkids, help buying a house or whatever it is. It's one of those things where it's like, well, what's the use in sort of locking up this money and sitting on it for another, 10, 20 years when at the moment people are needing that money a little bit more earlier. So, people are starting businesses with some of that cash. They're going to the bank of mum and dad for a bit more support. I do think we've got to think quite carefully about just that whole later in life transition. Not only retirement, but even the likes of skills. Like, you've got a lot of people that are in the workforce at the moment that at some point will head away. Now, unless we somehow provide a very deliberate way for them to transfer their skills, you could have a whole bunch of very smart people who leave the workforce, a whole bunch of new people coming in who've got no real idea of how to do the work, and you sort of lose the momentum. And the worry, right, and I see this all the time, particularly in provincial New Zealand, some parts of, I think we looked at the South Island last year, some parts of South Island are losing 3 times as many workers to retirement as people are coming in. So, like, it's becoming a real crunch point. But often people are working and doing, quite physical tasks right up until retirement, where I would rather that we sort of, as businesses, think about people over time and say, look, let's move you back from the sort of absolute front line. Let's, to be a little bit sort of facetious, but how about we give you a deck chair and that you yell orders at the young people rather than doing all the hard yards yourself, because that will teach them how to sort of do this work over time. And it means that you don't have to be sort of going pedal to the metal right until 65 or 70. So there are ways I think we can manage this, but we do have to be a bit more conscious about it, because at the moment it just seems to be that everyone's running very, very fast until they hit retirement age, and then all of a sudden they just switch to track the other way.
All right, well, speaking of people that are taking their skills elsewhere, let's talk about the younger people that are moving to Australia. You're late 20s, right? So it's probably right in your sweet spot of demographic. Are you seeing some of your mates have these conversations?
Oh, I'm pretty sure that most of my friend group in Wellington has gone at this point.
No way.
But
Yeah.
I mean, part of that is natural. Like,
Yeah.
there is an element where that demographic do often move. People go and do an OE. Now, it is a lot more intense at the moment, don't get me wrong, but like, there is a natural element there. Part of it, a large part of it, is the labour market. In fact, if you look at the unemployment rate gap between New Zealand and Australia, and you map that onto the outflows of New Zealanders to Australia, it's almost a perfect match. Like, you can almost forecast where things are going. And so, as the New Zealand unemployment rate starts to come down, let's assume the Australian unemployment rate doesn't do a lot, I think you'll see that people don't look out to the rest of the world like it's got these magical opportunities that New Zealand doesn't have. It might just be that, New Zealand's a bit more even Stevens with other places. But yes, there's a big move out. I don't mind that awfully. I actually think it's important that New Zealanders go and get some sort of overseas experience. It's a big world out there. There's a lot of opportunities, a lot of different ways of working. The challenge is that we don't seem to have a good plan for why they should come back.
Yeah.
And looking and talking to friends, one of the reasons that a lot of Kiwis come back to New Zealand is not because necessarily of job opportunities or even house prices. It's because they'll get some free childcare from mum and dad if they're going to start a family. And look, that's not a bad reason. I mean, New Zealand's probably a pretty good place to bring up a kid, all things considered. You look at other parts of the world. But if you don't get that sort of trifecta of a good place to live, bring up kids, whatever it might be, a reasonable house and a reasonable job, it becomes a little bit hard to attract people back to the same degree. So that's probably my worry a little bit more, is there's not as much reason to stay, but there's an even bigger gulf between where people are at the moment and why they might come back to New Zealand.
Because being an economist, I'm sure you take interest in what's happening in Australia. And some of the commentary that I see, they're facing a lot of the same problems that we do. And a lot of their citizens are complaining about the exact same things, albeit I think they're a bit more brash and a bit more vocal, and will touch on topics that will go, oh, we think that's an issue, but we better not say that out loud, because do you know what I mean?
Totally. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, the Australian economy, from a macro perspective has always been like a little bit recession proof. You know, with mining and everything else, they are in not a bad spot. Their unemployment rate still remains relatively low. I think last I looked at it, it was like 4.1%. I mean, we'd be that'd be great if that was happening in New Zealand. But you also look at other parts of their economy, the likes of their house prices continue to hit record highs every month. Now,
Mhm.
not saying that New Zealand's housing market is in a good, affordable spot, but it's actually relatively a heck of a lot better than Australia. And that's why I find it so interesting when people go, oh, well, I'm going to move to Australia because it's more affordable or because, oftentimes you hear it politically when people say, I'm going to move if there's a capital gains tax enacted. I'm like, what, to Australia that has a capital gains tax? Like,
Yeah.
come on now. There are many reasons you might hop across the ditch, but like from some of these reasons, you might well earn more money, but you might be paying more as well. I mean, the classic on that front is London. I hear a lot of friends that love to go on the OE. It's a pretty, well trodden path for particularly lawyers and similar. But talking to a lot of Kiwis over there, a lot of them say, yeah, you earn more money, but you sort of spend roughly the same amount of growth money to just live, paying for the tube or whatever else it is. So
Mm.
it gives you different experiences, but put it this way, New Zealand's population has grown to something like, what, 5.3 million. There's got to be a reason that we haven't cleared out the country yet, and it must be because there's still some decent opportunities here. Different horses for courses, but it's not all doom and gloom.
And what is the general sentiment amongst, friends that are, your age, and just maybe do you collect a little bit of a view of what they're saying, when you're spending time with them versus sort of what you're looking at when you're reading data and what they think the future of New Zealand looks like?
Totally. I mean, I think particularly where that one becomes much more stark between the data and just in different age groups in general is the sort of housing situation for Kiwis. Now, I mean, both in terms of buying a house, but even just rentals. Recently I've been talking to a lot more friends about how, rent prices have fallen in parts of New Zealand. That's a pretty unusual thing for a lot of young people. That's great. You can get a, cheaper housing all of a sudden. For others, they're thinking about buying a house, and yes, house prices are low at the moment. So if you bought in 2021 or similar, you're feeling the pain. I had one friend bought their first house basically at the peak of the market in Wellington. I think at one point they'd lost $350,000 of value,
Jeepers.
and they needed to find 60,000 more just that 1 year to repay the mortgage because of how much the mortgage rate had increased. Like that
Mm.
was awful for them. But I've also got a lot of other friends who are looking at things and going, actually, now I can get into the housing market because prices are relatively more affordable. So there is all of that that's going around. The thing that I think people are still concerned about, if you will, is just the career progression. Like people want not only a good job and a good, well paying job, but something that means something to them and that they can sort of see that ability to move forward. And you've got to have all the basics, but I do find it wild, but somewhat encouraging when you see some of those surveys of, what different generations want from work, that often they'll say, I would take a bit of a pay cut if it was work that I was really passionate about and felt like I was doing something with. So
Mm.
money's important, but sort of just pure out and out money and nothing else with regard to, there's a bit more, I think, nuance to what people are looking for. Sometimes it's money, but it's also what they get to do with it.
Well, then is an overarching thing for that conversation of if we go the negative, the economy's not doing well and it's cooked, etc. But what do people need to see typically for them to say that the economy is delivering for them or that it's doing better and they get on board with that narrative and say, you know what, maybe that is accurate?
I think probably the Goldilocks zone for the economy for a lot of households is when inflation is a bit more low and stable than where it is at the moment. You don't have to sort of worry as much about what you're having to pay for at the supermarket or your energy bill. Your jobs growth is reasonable enough that as your circumstances change, you have a child, you sort of, get into a relationship, you break up, whatever it might be, you're coming into the workforce, you're coming out of training, that there are opportunities there and they're decent enough that you can earn a reasonable wage, and that, your living situation, the basics are sort of available to you. That would be the general Goldilocks zone. One thing that's changed, I think, in New Zealand over the last 5 years, both for households and businesses, is that the government has become a larger proportion of the economy. And the reason I say that is during the pandemic, we sort of naturally had to look to the government a bit more to make decisions. They were telling us if we were locked down or not. And some of those decisions were important from a health perspective. But I do worry that it's made us a little bit too reliant on government leading the economy in general. And often I look at, we're in an election year this year and people are asking a lot of questions about, how do we get things better? What should we be doing? What should we be looking out for in the election? And I worry when people say, oh, we're just going to sort of, hit pause until after the election's finished. I mean, at the moment, you'd be hitting pause on a business for 11 months because the
Mm.
election period has basically already begun. you probably won't have a coalition agreement on whatever form it takes until late December. It's a long time as a business to just sit on your hands. And so I do worry that we're a bit more focused on letting government or whatever else dictate our lives, when I'd love to see people that, businesses, households who sort of take their own destiny into their own hands, create a business, find a side hustle, do something a bit more proactive, because I do think there's a lot more that we can do ourselves rather than just relying on others to do it for us.
On side hustles, wage growth, how is wage growth calculated? Is it purely, okay, the wages used to be on aggregate X, now they are Y, that's the percentage change? And is it a gross level, or is it after tax?
It's normally before tax, and that's only because not only do you have to account for tax at some point, but also all the other tax credits. So, like, and this is one of the challenges we often have when journalists, for example, ask us, "Can you calculate what's been happening, to the average household?" It's like, what's the average household? Do they have
Yeah.
kids or not? Do they have kids under a certain limit? Do they get working for families, tax credits, and that? So all of that becomes quite complex. There's two major ways, though, that we calculate wages. One is average hourly earnings, which is just taking everyone in the economy, or those that are surveyed, and saying, how much do you get paid per hour? If you get paid out a salary, take your standard 40-hour week or however your contract and sort of split that out. Now, the difficulty with that measure, the average hourly earnings, is it can be skewed by what jobs are in the economy. So, for example, when the tourism economy took a big dip during the pandemic because there weren't as many international tourists, a whole bunch of people who previously reported part-time work at presumably a lower wage rate because it was part-time work, they fell out of the numbers, which meant that artificially wage growth was higher because all of a sudden you were only looking at the full-time workers and you'd sort of ignore the part-time. So there's a little bit of a discrepancy or difference there. The other way that it's measured, though, is what is referred to as the labour cost index. So that's not what you or I would get paid. It's what businesses calculate that they have to pay out to their employees. The thing is, though, is that if you do that, then over time, if you were to take a business that had, I don't know, three people, it had a CEO, a middle manager, and, a data analyst. And so you might well have sort of, you've got sort of low paid, middle paid, high paid. If you added in a COO at the same level as CEO, all of a sudden you've got another very high paid resource. Now, they might be doing a whole lot more work than what the middle manager or the data analyst are doing. So if you were to sort of calculate the wages and say, well, that company's wages have gone up massively, not really, they're doing different work. So the labour cost index that Stats NZ produces, it sort of corrects for the change in the type, the quality of work that's being done, as well as the quantity. Now, the reason I say that and it becomes so important is during the pandemic, heaps of people got not necessarily a pay increase, but they got a change in title. So people were, promoted from associate to senior. Now, they might not have got paid anything more. They might not have been doing a whole lot more, but technically their job was all of a sudden different. And so there was this real sort of difficulty around, are we measuring people's pay? Are we measuring people's titles? Like, what's actually in the composition? So be a bit careful with all of the wage statistics because there's a lot of different ways you can cut the numbers.
And I think that's probably what becomes overwhelming for the everyday person trying to look at some of this data. And I mean, an easier example would be people are saying to me, oh, the economy's cooked, look at liquidations are at record highs. And I'm saying, yeah, but they're almost at record lows a couple of years ago. So eventually things have to average out and the foot was taken off of the throat. So you can't use, that's a lagging indicator, not a like here and now indicator.
But the context is also important. Like when if we were having the same number of businesses in 2009 and 2025, then yeah, those liquidations would appear like record highs. But you've got a whole lot more businesses now than there were before. A whole lot's been created over the 15 years or so between then and now. And so if you look at business closures as a proportion of total businesses operating, it's not nearly as hardcore as the GFC was. And I think that feels sort of more reasonable. We're also, I think, as humans, a bit programmed to look for the bad news.
Yeah.
And so that does cloud our judgment a bit more. I think, though, and this is probably on people like myself who do a lot of commentating, we try to make it easier, but I think we've also got to add a lot of caveats in. And that's one of the things I really struggle with talking to the media, just because there's a lot that you try to get across all at once, but often it doesn't make the cut. Number of times that people sort of stop me in the street and say, oh, you didn't mention this, you didn't mention that. It was like in the 10 minutes that we did the interview, I totally did. But the 10 seconds that made it onto radio or TV, it didn't make the cut.
Yeah.
So I should have made it in a better way, clearly, but like not everything makes it in.
Back to then the side hustle piece. Sorry. So like wage growth, for instance, because something that I am concerned about for people or a lot of households is that their household inflation rate will be higher than what their ability is to grow their income. And the longer that that carries on for, they just resent the economy more. They resent the settings, they resent the country, and they resent those that are doing well or do have the ability to beat that. Because I think sometimes it's an education gap that there may be something that they could do. So yeah, the way I've sort of seen it is that for a lot of those households, their wages probably haven't been keeping up with inflation. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, in general, I mean, if you look at the likes of my preferred measure of looking at wage inflation and household inflation together, if you're going to make that comparison, is the likes of either the CPI, Consumers Price Index, or the household living cost price indices. Either way, they're higher than what sort of your general wage inflation has been, no matter what way you cut it. So yeah, people are generally going a bit more backwards. Part of it's also that people often made more than the cost of living increases were a couple of years ago. So it depends a little bit on your starting point. But I take the point. People are under a lot more pressure overall. What I think is interesting, though, is when we look at employment growth, it is down. Jobs are lower than a year ago. Business growth is still higher. Business growth is positive. There are more businesses being created than shuttered every day. That does suggest that there's a level of gumption out there from Kiwis who are going, actually, no, I will find a way to make this work. Maybe not everything, but sometimes those little side hustles do make an important sort of change. And I wonder if for a lot of people, it's less that they're having to completely go out by themselves. They're not necessarily going to leave their current job to go and get, or to become their own boss. But it is more that they will try something on the side. It might not be huge, but there's clearly opportunities out there. I've got friends, I'm a marriage celebrant myself, for example. I'm not saying it's the biggest earner, but it's a different thing that you can do at the same time. People are otherwise, offering services. I know a lot of, high school kids that are offering to do dog walking or a little bit of cleaning, because the other thing that we're noticing in the economy, and you see this in spending stats and everything else, is that New Zealanders, like the rest of the world, is got a much greater focus on convenience. And that means that if I'm a two-person household, everyone in the household is working, I haven't got as much time to do those other things. So people are looking to contract out various other services. That does provide opportunity, but you've got to go looking for it.
Well, you might like this one. A Keep the Change listener was telling us how they've been putting people's bins out for them in Queenstown.
Nice.
Yeah. And, that's as simple as business needs to be, right? So sometimes the owners aren't there. They don't want to. Might even be Airbnb. So they have got a subscription-based service where they'll take them out for you and then they'll put them back in.
Well, you think of the amount of hassle, though. Like, there's a whole lot of small examples like that, right? Where, like, as a household or a business or whatever, you're going, look, it would cost me a lot to go and resource that or to put it out. Or the hassle then that if I get a bad review on my Airbnb because the rubbish bin's not empty or whatever. Like, there's often some pretty reasonable options there. And I think for a lot of people, right, it doesn't have to be massive and at scale. You're not necessarily trying to replace your entire salary. It's just sometimes a top up, either for, to bring you back up to even balance. But sometimes it's, well, I want to save for that holiday. And so if all my normal money is going towards just daily life, then whatever my side hustle is depends on if I can, do a weekend trip to Wanganui or overseas.
I think two great things happen when people do try these things, especially if they enjoy doing it. And one is that they realize, oh, I can make money. So the way that they had previously been taught to make money isn't just the only option. And then some people, I think their back is so far against the wall that they sort of have to make it work. And almost wonder with people, some people moving to Australia, once they get there, they ignore the macroeconomic conditions over there because now they've sort of burnt the New Zealand boat and they're like, well, we have to make it work.
It's got to go through, because otherwise what are we going to do? Go back again? Like, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Completely agreed. And I think part of that is, I mean, you don't want people to have to be in that sort of struggle street that they feel backs against the wall.
No.
But I think it's important that people still are looking to do that a bit more, because it shows, I think, that again, to a degree, there's a lot of other stuff that's outside of your control. And I think that's a challenge in the economy at the moment. None of us can figure out or sort of dictate, how all of the businesses across the world are going to go, how the US president's going to make decisions about tariffs or anything else. There's a lot of stuff that you as a personal household just cannot influence. It's the stuff that you can influence that's probably more important to focus on, because you can figure out how you react to all of it.
So I think inflation at the moment is sitting around 3.1%, is it? So that's the basket of goods, which I'm sure you can touch on to teach us, but also there's some components in there that people are probably noticing that are going up even faster, and some things that I've spotted: insurance, I think you'll probably mention bread, but power for people as well. Until those level out, is there the risk that people just assume that costs are running away on them because they're so noticeable and in their face?
I would think so. I mean, so we did some analysis at Infometrics looking at essentials versus discretionary spending. And inflation on essentials is up 3.8% on average over the last year. That's above the 25-year average. Spending or costs prices for the discretionary, not as essential spending, only up 1.8%. So there's a clear gap between what is absolutely necessary and not. And some of those items, like you say, have gone up massively more. Electricity prices are up 12% over the last year. Gas is up 16. Those are the highest increases since like the late 1980s. So it's been a long time since you've seen that sort of increase. Meat, dairy have all gone up. Bread is up 53% from where it was a year ago. Now, if those costs have gone up, on the other side, the likes of, buying some whiteware, a new dishwasher or whatever, has gone down. Cool. As a household, if I'm struggling to buy bread, I'm not thinking about buying a dishwasher. That's really the last thing on my mind. So there is a big difference, I think, between those big bits of spending that you can defer. You can say, not now, I just can't afford it. And the stuff where you're going, I've got to put a roof over my head, I've got to put fuel in the car, I've got to put food on the table. The essentials are pretty essential at the moment, but they are the most expensive too.
I want to touch on the South Island because I saw a graph the other day from Centrix, and they've got arrears and sort of mapped in colour the greener the better, the redder the worse. And I'm pretty sure the entire South Island, bar maybe one region, was green, and just people less likely to be behind on their arrears down there. Does it become tricky talking about New Zealand and your role when you're almost at a time where you've got to talk about the two regions or two islands as completely separate in terms of economies?
It does become tricky. I mean, I think it also, it's not only the regions, but it's just different industries. Like that's why the likes of, Otago has an unemployment rate below 3%, but Auckland's is above 6. So you're right. There are big, big differences, but also quite big different drivers. Construction's been a big one for the likes of Auckland, where it was big and now it's come back a bit. There wasn't quite as much of a building boom in other parts of the country, so they sort of haven't had as much to lose. You also look at the likes of international tourism, which has been coming back, versus the likes of domestic travel, which was high a couple of years ago, but has now come lower because, well, Kiwis don't have as much spending. Now, that lower domestic travel has a bigger influence on the likes of your Wellingtons, your Wairarapas, your Aucklands, because that's where people might come for, All Blacks games or whatever else, that they're a little bit shy again on the spending. International visitors, yes, they come to Auckland and what have you to a degree, but they really love the South Island. They love going to Queenstown, they love going to Milford Sound and all that. And you see that in arrivals numbers. The number of international arrivals into the likes of Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch airports sitting at about 80% or so of pre-pandemic levels. Arrivals from overseas into Queenstown, 120% of pre-pandemic levels.
Far out.
So there's a real big focus there. The last bit, though, is the primary sector. Now, you might be saying, yeah, but there's cows on both islands. True, but there is a slightly stronger sort of focus on the primary sector in the South Island compared to the North, where, you look at the likes of Ruapehu District, they've lost their big, forestry providers and what have you. So there's sort of been more losses in the North Island because of other parts of the primary sector, likes of dairy payouts and all that, doing a bit better in the South Island.
So two things then on that dairy payout. Do you think, one, if they hadn't been receiving the levels of payout that they have through this last few years, that the economy would be in a really tricky place? And then two, how much impact is this Fonterra sale going to mean when you've got to start thinking about modelling and just what that could mean for the economy? Is it a big amount of money, or is it really a drop in the ocean compared to what else is happening?
It's a big amount of money. Whether or not it gets spent immediately and on what is the tricky thing. And that's also why, when you think about that sort of the dairy payout in that the last couple of years, it's why we're a little bit cautious about sort of going too gung-ho on the idea of high dairy payout and now a big capital payout equals big sort of economic trends in certain areas, because it hasn't to the same degree. I think all else being equal, the South Island economies, provincial economies would be weaker than they currently are because of dairy, but I don't think they'd be sort of like absolutely smashed, because what we've actually seen is that when you look at dairy spending and similar, the actual amount that's come out of farms has been fairly conservative so far. In fact, the amount of money that the agricultural sector has been holding in deposit accounts is sitting something like 10 to 15% higher than a year ago. So they've got paid the money. Farmers haven't necessarily spent it yet. And so I wonder if the same sort of thing will happen with the capital payout. People, I don't think, will go out on the day after the money hits their accounts and go, man, we're just going to be sort of running around town with a credit card and just spending it like no tomorrow. If they do, they're probably going to go out of business pretty quick because that's a one-time cash payment capital that you should put to better use. I suspect what you'll see more of over the next couple of years is a cautious level of spending, both on the higher dairy payout and also on that capital, on the likes of deferred maintenance that farmers haven't had to spend or been able to spend as much the last couple of years. So they'll do some more fencing. They might buy some new tech and equipment so that they're more efficient over time. They can run things for longer without having to rotate the cattle as much or whatever. But another big one is I think you'll see more sort of succession planning happening on farm. There's a whole bunch of people out there across New Zealand who are part of farming communities. They might have a couple of kids. They want to leave it to kid one, but they need to pay out kid two and kid three with money. They haven't got any money to do it. Now they might all of a sudden have some cash. So I think you might see a little bit more turnover and change around in the primary sector. But if I start to see, huge numbers of, I don't know, farmers who are buying batches and that, at nearby places, I reckon the dairy sector is probably in a tough place because it doesn't suggest that anyone's got any financial smarts.
Okay. All right, some lessons in there for the farmers. I wouldn't mind being a supplier to the farmers over the next couple of years, though, because I imagine there'd be a lot of people trying to sell to them. Speaking of succession, in terms of New Zealand, we are going through this aging demographic and we're having more and more people get to that age of 65. How much of a headwind do you think that superannuation cost is for a decreasing working tax base?
I think it's a big worry from a number of points of view. I mean, one, it's just a huge amount of money that we currently spend. That means that you have to tax for that. It means that you've got fewer opportunities to spend in other areas. At the moment, apart from health, New Zealand super is the biggest single line item the New Zealand government has. We spend more as a country on super than we do on the entire education budget. Now, if you want sort of more productive and smarter people over time, at the moment we have not got to focus on that as much as we do just paying people to be old. And that's what the payment is. The worry, though, that I have is that if you go back to, I think, the 1950s or so, you had something like six workers or taxpayers at any one time to pay for every person over 65 who is getting super. At the moment, you've got roughly four people paying into the tax system to pay for super. In the future, you'll have two. That means that over time, you've got to pay an ever larger portion of your tax bill to the government will go to paying super and not paying for something else. And I worry that, as we go forward, what do we give up on? What do we not spend on as much? Is it healthcare? Is it education? Is it defence? Just because we're not willing to sort of encounter that sort of pressure around super. And the biggest one for me is that, again, it's a lot of times that when I talk about super, people get worried and they say, "Oh, you're trying to steal super off us. We paid into the system and we're owed our dues." It's like, no, the way that the system works is that you paid for super at the time for those who are getting it. If you pay wages, PAYE, your taxes at the moment pay for current super. You're not really prepaying anything. And people are living a whole lot longer. I think there's people used to be spending something like 18% of their life sort of 20, 30 years ago on New Zealand super. It's now 22, 23% of their life. So you're having to pay for more people to spend longer on New Zealand super. And everyone who says that, well, we should just be more productive over time, because at the moment New Zealand super is linked to wages rather than inflation, you can actually never productively grow your way out of the challenge. You're going to continue to spend more and more. So what do we do about that? In my mind, you should probably lift the age a touch just to sort of keep in how much or how long of a proportion of your life you spend on super. I'd probably also decouple it from wages and link it to inflation so that people, as they go on to super, are getting the same amount of stuff that they can buy every week, but sort of they don't need it to be adjusted by wages specifically. And potentially we need to look at, means testing it in the future. That's a big change, but the world has moved on and I think we need to too.
Do you think people your age and younger people are more increasingly aware of this, where they're saying, hey, something needs to change because they've been educated? Or do you think you're in this space, so am I, we think about the stuff, others are like, yeah, surely, whatever, it'll be right, someone will pay for it?
I'm not sure it's as strong a view as it probably needs to be. What's been interesting the last couple of years, and I don't know if you've seen this as well, but people are talking a lot more about their KiwiSaver in younger age groups. But that often seems to be a lot more around the likes of their first home payments and similar, rather than thinking, well, I'm going to need X amount of money for retirement. And I know that even older generations that I've talked to, like more people my parents' age, going back a decade, a lot of them said, oh, we're not sure if super's going to be around when we hit retirement. Now most people are like, yeah, it'll be around. It's definitely going to be around. No one should touch it. So I don't know if it's until later in life that we really start to concentrate on the super bit. The only good thing I think is that greater focus on KiwiSaver more recently does mean at least that people are taking a bit more notice. Even if it's not direct on super, it's more around their financial well-being in general. So I'll take part wins there.
Yeah. Yeah, because I sort of zoom out and go, well, if we've got more people turning 65 that will then get the pension, and then we've got an increasingly aging population, they're going to need more health support. So there's more cost there. There's probably, we don't seem like we have other solutions. So it's probably going to be that we're going to saddle on more debt and we're going to then have to introduce more taxes to provide as the likely solutions. Because going back to what you're saying before, it doesn't seem like we're all of a sudden going to go, oh, hey, here's how we just grow our way out of it. And some interesting data that I always come back to and read, one of the accounting bodies in Australia does is they survey Asia Pacific. And New Zealand has um, more older business owners, and they are therefore less likely to export, innovate, grow, hire, do social media marketing, or take payment via a payment gateway. All of the things that we would probably think at our age range, like, oh, that's what you're still doing. But why would they be risk on when they're getting to that age?
Completely. And I mean, just the approach right from businesses and that to tech and innovation and everything else, I think is wild when it comes to generational differences. Like as a younger person, I walk into a room and people are like, this guy knows how technology works. No, I don't. I've got no flipping idea. I seem to have a little bit more willingness to like tutu around and figure out how it works. But like it is such a bigger opportunity that people don't embrace, and there is, a real generational divide. I remember, in our team when COVID hit and we went into lockdown, I went to the boss at the time and I said, hey, can I use my corporate credit card to get a Zoom account so we can do webinars for clients? And the boss looked at me and was like, I understood less than half of that sentence, but sure, go for it. What's the harm? We talked to more people in that first week, noting there was a lockdown and they were interested in the economy, but more people in 1 week than like we probably would have in a year or so, because the people were engaged. It was a method to reach them. And so I worry that it's one of those things that might not damage your business in the short term, it might not lose you clients, but it certainly stops you acquiring them to the same degree. And so that generational difference is a big one. But you're right. Why would you change if you're an older business owner? But increasingly, how do you exit? How do you change your business when it's probably got to a big enough position where you probably can't sell it sort of for cash to someone because it's sort of become too big, but it's also too small to be, necessarily acquired by really big businesses as part of mergers and acquisitions. So there is a little bit of a difficult sweet spot, or the reverse of a sweet spot for a lot of businesses where people then almost have to sell for cheap just to get out, just to find someone else to pay for it. So that succession is going to be difficult.
Yeah, I think vendor finance will become a big thing in New Zealand as some of these business owners exit. Hey, I'm mindful you need to get out of here. You're a very busy man. You've only got 86 appointments today and 14 Zooms, and then you might get 3 hours of sleep before doing it all
Couple
tomorrow.
more flights as well.
Good man. I should have asked earlier on, but for those of us who see you on TV and see the profile growing and think about the work you're doing, like who's getting in touch with Infometrics and going, oh, hey, do this? Because I guess none of us would even really have an understanding of the types of clients that you guys are doing work for, because we just probably assume that you talk to media half the time and take flights.
My father asked me once how much I got paid for every media interview, which I found hilarious, and so do all the journalists that I talk to. But so we work sort of across a number of areas, and we're probably a different consultancy than a lot of others. We don't like doing huge, big PDF reports for government agencies all the time. We sometimes do them, but we do a lot with the likes of regional and local councils across the country. If you want to know how the New Zealand economy is going, you might go to Stats NZ or the Treasury or the Reserve Bank. If you want to know how the Whangarei economy is going or how the Christchurch economy is going, a lot of people come to us for those sort of local numbers, and we put a lot of time into understanding local economies. We do a lot of specialist forecasting as well, the likes of cost escalation, construction forecast, transport forecasts. So we do some specialist stuff there. And then general consultancy for private businesses as well. The thing that I'm quite excited about is that we do a lot of forecasts and sort of analysis for education facilities and sort of operators. What sort of skills are coming up over the next 5 years? Who do we need to train? What sort of areas of the country are going to see growth so that we can sort of have the right people who are coming into the future. So it's quite varied. On top of all of that, we do the media stuff, but it's more because we sort of believe that the more information that's out there, the better information and better informed people are, the better decisions they will make. And we quite like putting economics simply. And so if we can do that, then it makes the world go around a whole lot faster, you hope.
Nice one. Well, if people do need to get in touch or want to get in touch, whether it's about getting married or economics, how do they do that?
A whole lot of ways. The Infometrics website, infometrics.co.nz, is normally a good place to start. It's also where you get as much of our sort of information on regional economies and everything else. We try to make a fair bit of stuff public. I'm on Instagram as well. If people really want to get in touch that way, Brad Olsen NZL. There's a lot of random DMs that come in. A lot of lovely people who are asking for various ideas. I'm not a financial advisor. Please don't ask me too specifically about your mortgage rate. I don't even have one myself, so I'm not sure what sort of specifics I'm going to give, but hey, I'm always up for a yarn. And probably most importantly, if people see me in person, come along for a yarn. I don't know if you're up for it as well, but like I like to. In fact, we saw each other on a plane last time, I think. It was like a quick, hey, it's a good way to do it in person. So yeah, come up and have a yarn. Always open for the conversation.
Yeah, I was about to say probably the best place to find Brad will be at an airport around the country or see him on a flight. But yeah, it is quite nice when instead of people just looking at you and ignoring you, they do, engage in a bit of chat. But I'd imagine you're probably still working on the plane as well. But it's
always.
Yeah. Good on you, mate. Well, all the best for a big year. Maybe we'll check back in at the end of 2026 and see how the New Zealand economy went as we come out the other side of an election and start looking to what the next 3 years looks like, whether we've still got a national government or flip back to Labour.
And look, certainly hoping that the economy continues to improve. And I like to think that a lot of people have got opportunities to sort of make that happen rather than just sort of sitting back and watching it happen from the sort of sidelines.